January 1943. German forces are stretched across the continent. In the east, the catastrophe of Stalingrad is unfolding as the Soviet Red Army tightens its encirclement around the German Sixth Army. In the Balkans, a different kind of war is being fought in the forests and mountains of occupied Yugoslavia, where communist-led partisan forces under Josip Broz Tito have built a resistance movement that threatens to destabilize the entire German rear. Berlin responds with massive anti-partisan offensives, combining divisions of the German armed forces, the Wehrmacht, alongside paramilitary SS formations, and Allied units drawn from the collaborationist states of occupied Europe. Into the mountains of northern Bosnia, one of the most important regions of occupied Yugoslavia, marches a new division assembled from Croatian volunteers, commanded by German officers, and pledged to both Adolf Hitler and the fascist Croatian state. Behind it lies a legacy of catastrophic defeat. The men who form this unit carry the number of a regiment destroyed at Stalingrad. They call themselves the Devil's Division, and this name will prove accurate. On the 6th of April, 1941, Nazi Germany and its allies attacked the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and conquered its territory in less than 2 weeks. Already during the fighting, on the 10th of April 1941, Nazi Germany established in its place, among other puppet states, the independent state of Croatia, in Croatian, the Nezavisna Država Hrvatska, or NDH. This new entity was placed under the control of the Ustaše movement, a Croatian fascist organization led by Ante Pavelić, who modeled himself on Hitler and Mussolini, and immediately launched a campaign of mass murder against Serbs, Jews, and Roma people within the NDH's territories. The Ustaše state aligned itself completely with Nazi Germany and sought to demonstrate its value as an ally through military contribution. By the 25th of June 1941, less than 3 months after the occupation began, Pavelić had already sent an envoy to Berlin, offering Croatian volunteers for service on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. Hitler accepted the offer, and Croatian recruitment began immediately. The first formation raised was the 369th Croatian Reinforced Infantry Regiment, known informally as the Croatian Legion, assembled from volunteers in July 1941 in the cities of Varaždin and Sarajevo. Including a Bosnian Muslim battalion, the regiment numbered approximately 5,000 men. After training in Austria, it was deployed to the Eastern Front under the command of the 100th Jäger Division, which was then part of the 17th Army within Army Group South. In the fighting of 1941 and 1942, the regiment performed reliably in difficult conditions, earning the respect of German commanders. By the summer of 1942, it found itself advancing with German Army Group South toward the lower Volga River in southern Russia, and in the autumn of 1942, it was drawn into the fighting at Stalingrad, the ruined industrial city where the legendary Battle of the Second World War was beginning to take shape. The Battle of Stalingrad became the destruction of the Croatian Legion. The regiment was committed to fighting around the Red October factory and for Mamajev Kurgan, the vital hill overlooking the city. By December 1942, it had been reduced to 1/3 of its original strength of 5,000 men. When the Soviet Red Army completed its encirclement of the German Sixth Army, the Croatian Legion was trapped inside the pocket alongside approximately 300,000 German, Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian soldiers. As the encirclement tightened through January 1943, roughly 1,000 wounded Croatian soldiers were evacuated by air before the final collapse. On the 31st of January 1943, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus announced the surrender of the 6th Army, and the remaining Croatian legionaries, nearly 900 men, marched into Soviet captivity and were sent to camps in Siberia, where most of them died of starvation, cold, and disease. The Croatian Legion ceased to exist as a fighting formation. The survivors who had been evacuated before the surrender, along with newly recruited Croatian volunteers, became the nucleus of a new unit. Already on the 21st of August 1942, while the original regiment was still fighting in the east, the Germans had begun forming the 369th Croatian Infantry Division at Stockerau and Döllersheim in Lower Austria, honoring the doomed regiment by giving the new formation its number. The division also adopted the nickname of a Croatian unit from the First World War, the 42nd Home Guard Infantry Division of the Austro-Hungarian Army, which had been known as the Vražja Divizia, meaning the Devil's Division. The new formation numbered approximately 14,000 troops, its Croatian volunteers wearing Wehrmacht uniforms, with a Croatian checkerboard patch on their sleeves and helmets. They swore a dual oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, but also to Ante Pavelić and the independent state of Croatia. Command was almost entirely German. Roughly 3,500 German officers and specialists ran the division from top to bottom, controlling their Croatian volunteers at every level. Although originally intended for the Eastern Front, the worsening situation in Yugoslavia changed German plans. Tito's partisan movement in Yugoslavia had grown into a serious military threat to Germans and their plans, and Berlin needed reliable formations to contain it. In December 1942, the German High Command redirected the division to the Balkans. As it arrived in Croatia, desertions began almost immediately, driven by reports of Axis defeats on the Eastern Front and in North Africa. The men who stayed were about to fight a war in which their unit had, on one hand, low combat fighting value in anti-partisan fighting, but on the other, distinguished itself with indiscriminate brutality. From the beginning of 1943, the division was deployed across Bosnia and Herzegovina in a succession of large-scale sweeps aimed at destroying partisan bases and the civilian networks that supported them. The methods followed a standard pattern. Villages suspected of contact with the resistance were surrounded, their male inhabitants were rounded up, and those accused of aiding partisans were shot or hanged without trial. Livestock was seized, food stocks were taken or destroyed, and houses were burned. The populations of entire settlements were driven from their homes, and the buildings left as burned ruins. These were not incidental excesses, but the deliberate application of German anti-partisan doctrine, which often mandated reprisal executions of up to 100 civilians for every German or Allied soldier killed, and around 50 for those wounded in response to partisan attacks in the Balkans. Prisoners of war received no better treatment. Partisan fighters who were captured were routinely executed rather than held. The laws and customs of war that governed the treatment of prisoners, already routinely ignored in the anti-partisan war in Yugoslavia, were treated by the division as irrelevant. The division operated in a theater where German command had explicitly declared that the laws of war did not apply, and it acted accordingly. The scale and consistency of the violence against civilians during more than the 2 years the division spent in Yugoslavia was not the result of a breakdown in discipline, but the product of a deliberate and institutional method. The most concentrated single episode of mass murder in which the division took part came between the 26th and 30th of March 1944, when it participated alongside the SS Division, Prince Eugen, and the Chetnik Dinara Division in a punitive sweep through the Dalmatian hinterland between the Kameshnica and Mosor Mountains in the area near the town of Tril, in what is today Croatia. Partisan forces had already retreated by the time the soldiers arrived in the villages, and what followed was a systematic massacre of the civilian population that remained. On the 26th of March, the first day of the sweep, soldiers entered Donji Dolac and forced its inhabitants into their homes, which were then set alight. Those who attempted to escape were shot. In the village, 272 people were burnt alive, among them 103 children. In the days that followed, the same method was applied across the neighboring villages. In Vostane, between 337 and 400 civilians were killed, including 143 children. The same pattern was repeated in villages such as Podi, Ruda, Otok, Krivodol, Ljut, and Rože. Across the entire area, at least 1,525 civilians were killed in the space of 5 days. Other estimates, based on contemporary Wehrmacht and partisan reports, place the number as high as 3,000. The pattern of collective punishment reached one of its clearest documented expressions on the 11th of September 1944, when, under the direct orders of the division's commander, Fritz Neitholt, soldiers of the 369th entered the villages of Zagniezde and Udora near the city of Stolac in Herzegovina. All the men of the villages were hanged, and the women and children were driven out of their homes. By the autumn of 1944, the military situation was collapsing on all fronts. Soviet forces had entered Romania and Bulgaria, while the partisan movement was growing stronger and had come to control large portions of Yugoslavia. Desertions from the Croatian ranks of the division became a flood. In one battalion of the division, Croatian soldiers even killed their German officers and liaison personnel. What had been presented as a unified fighting force was fracturing along the internal contradictions it had always contained. Croatian volunteers and German cadre, who had never fully trusted one another, fighting a war that was already lost. By April 1945, the Croatian manpower of the division had shrunk to between 2,000 and 3,000 men. During the last few weeks of the war, what was left of the division fought in northwest Bosnia and Slavonia, retreating towards Austria. After moving through northern Croatia, it broke up and various groups in the area went to northern Slovenia and Austria. On the 11th of May 1945, part of the division was stopped and disarmed by partisan forces. The remaining group attacked a brigade of partisans near the town of Dravograd in Slovenia as it tried to cross into Austria, territory which was safer for them due to their crimes in the Balkans. On the 15th of May 1945, most of the Croatian armed forces survivors formally surrendered. In total, 160 officers and 2,876 men of the 369th Croatian Division surrendered to the British. The Germans were sent to camps in Austria and spared repatriation. The Croatians were handed over to the Yugoslav partisans, sent back across the border, and most were executed. Generalleutnant Fritz Neitholt, the division's commander from its formation in August 1942 until October 1944, was extradited to Yugoslavia after the end of the Second World War. He was tried for war crimes done, among others by the 369th Croatian Infantry Division, found guilty and hanged on the 5th of March 1947. The history of the 369th Croatian Infantry Division is that of a formation assembled from the wreckage of a catastrophe, only to be destroyed in another. It distinguished itself not on the battlefield, but in the number of civilians it killed, leaving behind burnt homes, mass graves, and shattered communities.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.